Hello, I'm Sherry Sturman, Director of Crayola Education. Welcome to Crayola's Art of Learning program. Today, we're going to explore how the arts and travel broaden children's understanding of the world, whether they're traveling within their community or dreaming of visits to other countries. So gather the children, grab some art supplies, and join us on this journey and hands-on art making session. I'm thrilled to introduce today's guests. Robert Storr, artist, curator, educator, and chairman of the Professional Fine Arts Committee for the Foundation for Art and Preservation in Embassies, also known as FAPE. And we're excited to have Tom Lee guide us in the hands-on projects so our viewers can create alongside him. Tom is a professional storyteller, artist, and educator. He's the artistic director of Arts Voyage, a free arts program for children in grades 3 through 12. Robert, how can art help people understand about other countries and cultures and connect people across the globe?
Well, it can, because if you see a world which you've never seen before, you begin to ask yourself questions about what makes it so, what makes it different from yours. And you can see very readily big differences between different worlds or different parts of the globe. So, for example, I'm wearing a scarf, which was made in Italy, but it's kind of the color of things in Jaipur, India. And in India, the color schemes are yellow, orange, and purple predominantly. So those are not the primary colors in the West. The primary colors in the West are yellow, blue, and red. And that's a big difference. There's one basic premise in anything having to do with color, and it's something that Joseph Albers, who was a Bauhaus artist, set forward in a series of exercises he designed for people to work with. And that is that color is always interactive. You name a color, you say red. How many reds can you think of? There's an almost complete spectrum of reds. Then you say, well, red and what? Well, it's the and part that's important, because red and green is one thing, red and blue is another, red and yellow is another, and so on. So you're talking about slices of the spectrum, which is basically, say, slices of the rainbow. And how do they juxtapose one to the other? How do they rub up against each other and set the eye sparkling? The world provides the stimulus, but it's how our eyes absorb that which is outside of ours. And that is an effect of neurology. It's an effect of culture, habit, and it's color is not one thing. It's a bundle of things woven together, and that is really important to remember, because when people say, "I don't like this color, I do like that color," well, my question is, that color and what? Did you see that particular hue in connection with something that did not give it the benefit of its richness, or did you see it by itself alone? Or did you see it in complementary relationship with something that does heighten its effects?
I love your focus on color. Kids can really relate to that, learning so much about the way color is seen around the world. Beautiful. Yeah. Tom, you've spent a lot of time with students and have said that children have taught you everything you know. Please share a favorite example of what you've learned from children and how working with kids keeps your inner child alive.
Oh, well, that's an easy question to answer. I always feel incredibly lucky when I get to bring a group of students to a museum and find out what they see and what they notice. I love to talk to children about what they look for in an artwork and the things they notice. And one of the best ways to do that is to ask boys and girls to sketch, to make a drawing. We always bring our sketchbooks to the museum, and the more kids look, the more they notice, and the more they include in their sketches. And usually kids don't worry about their drawing. They don't criticize themselves. They just leap into it and let that pencil show what they see. And I try to draw like a child when I'm in a museum. I try to look and draw just like a child.
Tom, as a professional storyteller, you have performed folktales and traditional stories from around the world. Please tell our viewers how the storytelling art form increases people's understanding of other cultures and how storytelling can be a form of travel.
Maybe there's a story that already exists in that painting, or maybe we need to kind of use our imagination to think about what's happening in that picture and create our own story. And then you can find out the stories about how the artists decided to paint what they paint or sculpt what they sculpt. I love to learn about artists' lives and how they worked on their drawing, how they learned their craft and their artwork, and sort of tell the story of artists and how they learned to create and the struggles that many of them had to get their creations out into the world. So there's lots and lots of stories connected to every artwork that you see anywhere.
Robert, there are two special artists that we'd like you to talk about today. And both have contributed art to FAPE to share in other countries. And both have addressed our topic today, travel. Let's start with you telling our viewers about Ellsworth Kelly, who had a prolific career working as an artist for over 60 years. And please tell us how travel, particularly in Europe, influenced his art.
An all-American American, and he was very much a product of the Northeast of the United States. But he was sent to Europe at the time of the Second World War. He was in the invasion of D-Day. He was part of that. And he worked for the Camouflage Corps of the U.S. Army. And that was what he did. So his military service was actually, his war was fought with color or tone. In some cases, it was shades of green, camouflage, some shades of gray, in other cases, other things. But anyway, he learned the language of color in practical terms under fire, actually. And so when you talk about Ellsworth, you think of that. And of course, when he got to Paris, he sort of started hunting up artists who were there. And he got to know a lot of European artists who were involved in simple blocks of color juxtaposed to one another. Almost everybody starts with figuration. And Ellsworth did too. Almost everybody starts with pictures. But art is not just pictures. Art is the arrangement of the elements that make that picture and the rearrangement of those elements. So if you take what you would use to describe a tree and pare it down, you end up with curves and straight lines. If you take something to describe a tree that's chromatic, that's to say has to do with color, you look at different colors of different trees at different times of year. And that is the way you actually know about color, is by experiencing it in nature and then by re-experiencing it in art, sometimes without the reference there at all. It's not a tree any longer. These are not leaves in the fall. These are just shades of brown and orange and green.
What a beautiful way to describe that. And I'm sure that a lot of our audience, that will really make sense as they're making decisions about their own artwork and what is enough to convey their message. Please tell us how the U.S. Postal Service honored Ellsworth Kelly's career.
Well, they made a set of stamps, and the set of stamps are individual paintings that he made, which were in fact iconic paintings. That's to say, there's a very memorable image to them. But the key thing in Ellsworth's art is that the iconic quality is not owed to symmetry. It's owed to things that are slightly off symmetry. And the way in which we remember images is those things that we can hold in our mind as they were. But what Ellsworth did is he worked very closely with forms, and then he would throw them off center, and he would throw them out of the center. In other words, he would locate them not at the center of the page necessarily, or if they were centered, the sides would not be exactly equivalent. One curve on this side does not perfectly match a curve on that side. One top does not perfectly match a bottom. So that makes them almost impossible to remember, because our minds cannot freeze them in the way that we can symmetrical shapes. So his art is vital because we need to keep re-seeing it. We need to keep going and viewing it to have that experience again. We cannot take it away with us in our memories.
What a lovely insight that invites children to look really carefully and observe. And when they look at those stamps, to look for that asymmetry that you just described. Robert, please tell our viewers about another FAPE artist, Stephen Antonakis, and his travel collages.
Okay, Stephen was an amazing artist. Like many artists of his generation, he did projects many places, and he was Greek, born in Greece. He came to this country, the United States, but he would go around this country and he'd go around the world doing projects. And when he traveled, he would try to think of something he could do, artistically to respond to the places he was in, and also to use up the time in hotels that artists have. And he, just decided that what he was going to do is take the available materials, soap bars, stationery in the hotels, maps, bits and pieces of things that he found on the street, and make these collages that were sort of memory banks, time capsules, place capsules of what he was experiencing on his travels. And that is what he did. And there's a whole wall of these that's going to soon be installed in the American Embassy in Athens. And I forget what it is, several hundred of them. And they're so rich because there are associations connected to every element in them. But the way in which they're arranged is unique. It's not just sort of laying out a series of things in a very strict pattern. They're playful. He treats concrete things as if they were abstract shapes rather than boiling them down as abstract shapes.
I love the way you describe them as both playful and so meaningful and significant. Really great sparks for the memory. Tom, please tell us how travel inspires the work that you do.
I bought a hat and I moved to Scotland for the summer. And I asked the man at the hat shop to mail me the hat. So he put the hat in a box, and the box arrived in Scotland, and I still have it to this day. It's covered with stamps, and the stamps are canceled, and there's writing on the box. And when I got the box, I was excited about the hat, but I was even more excited at the beautiful collage that had been created almost by accident, well, really by accident, on this box. And I've always kept this box, and I've thought about collages, and I've thought about stamps, and I've spent a lot of time with boys and girls in different schools looking at and thinking about stamps. So it all happened from buying a hat. So here's the box that I was telling you about, and here's the little stamp collage that got made almost by accident. But ever since, I decided to use this great box to store some interesting stamps. Get the lid off. So I just have a few in here, but I have to, boys and girls can ask around. I bet your parents or your grandparents have some old letters or even old postcards like this one. Here's one from Portugal. This one is from Budapest that a friend of mine sent me. And I always loved this stamp with the Hungarian writing. So if you look around, even, good old American, lots of fun.
Every Art of Learning program includes hands-on art making. So now's the time for our viewers to pick up some markers, color pencils, crayons, any art supplies you have handy. We're delighted to have artist and art educator Tom Lee leading these colorful art experiences. So get ready to create alongside him. Tom, please show us how a variety of stamps could be an inspiration, including those that the U.S. Postal Service made in honor of Ellsworth Kelly, and then demonstrate how to sketch a stamp so that our viewers can create their own stamp art alongside you.
Sherry, we were really excited when these stamps were produced by the U.S. Postal Service. This is our friend Ellsworth Kelly, the wonderful artist that Bob was talking about earlier. And the Postal Service decided to put some of Ellsworth's artworks on stamps. So now we can share these beautiful artworks with people all over the country and all over the world just by sending them letters. So it was these stamps that I really got excited about sharing with students and asking them to sketch some of these beautifully colored images. So let's just look at one of these stamps with one of these beautiful pictures. I like this picture that's called Red Blue. Even though it's only two colors, there's a lot to look at and a lot to think about in this beautiful picture. And if I was going to sketch this, I might want to start with colored pencils, which are lots of fun. And I could think about that rectangular shape of the stamp. So I might start with that. But I love the way this red shape goes right to the edge. So I'm going to look at that. And it really comes right over here and touches and comes down. So that's my two shapes and my two colors. But when I use a colored pencil, I get this nice, it's kind of fun to fill in with a colored pencil. But one thing I know about Mr. Ellsworth Kelly. He loved colors that were vibrant and dense. So I might switch over and think about using my oil pastels because they give me, oh, look at that. Look what a nice, deep, solid red color that is. I have a feeling Mr. Kelly would like to see that. But even with this oil pastel, I can still see the white of my paper. So I'm going to really have to work to fill this in and make it really solid. You know, Ellsworth Kelly used to tell a story. He said when he was a little boy, he was in the kitchen and someone had dropped a stick of butter on the floor and he stepped on it. And I can just imagine how upset his mother might have been. But you know, he was fascinated when he took his foot off and he looked at this flattened stick of butter. He said he was fascinated by the shape. He was fascinated by the flatness of it. And he was fascinated by that solid yellow color. And I think about that story a lot when I look at Ellsworth Kelly's artworks. And I think about these intense colors. So I'm filling in here with my stamp sketch. If I were really taking my time, I'd fill this in a lot more solidly. And then people always notice about stamps that they have these perforations around the edges. So if I was going to sketch that, I want to sketch the whole stamp. So I get to do these fun wavy lines. And there's even some writing too. There's even, of course, it says Ellsworth Kelly in these very plain letters. You know, I always look at the way the letters are designed on stamps. Some of them are quite fancy. These are very simple. And then I think the date was up here, 2019, an important year. It's just a very quick little sketch of Ellsworth's stamp. But it helps me see the picture more clearly.
Wow, thank you, Tom. I love the way you've got us to look deeply into stamps. I didn't realize how those small pieces of artwork have such rich opportunity for us. Now for the second art demo, travel collages. Tom, please show our viewers how they could create their own travel collages inspired by those created by Stephen Antonakis, using objects that they might have gathered in a walk around their neighborhood or materials that are important to them and make them think about faraway places or trips that they imagine.
Sure. Well, here's a collage that I made after I looked at Mr. Antonakis's collages. I just thought it was a great coincidence that I love stamps, and I think he does too. A lot of his travel collages include just one stamp. So I took that idea, I dipped into my collection, and I took this red stamp from England, a stamp with Queen Elizabeth on it, and I made this collage. And you'll notice that there's some solid color. Then there's also this little square of lots and lots of messy painting, drawing, crayon, lots of different media. And this is one of my favorite things to include in a collage. And then I have one other element, this sort of pretty little scrap of music paper. You know, I keep a folder of scraps, all kinds of interesting bits of paper that I might, you know, who knows, I might use them in a collage. You never know what little piece of paper might turn in, but I decided to use this piece in the collage that we're going to make today. So one of my favorite parts of making these collages is the way I make this background artwork. It's kind of a separate project in itself. And I'm going to show you the video that I made that we speeded up so you can see how to do this at home. So I'm using some of these great Crayola watercolor paintbrushes and watercolor pencils. You can draw with the pencil or a crayon, like a regular crayon, but then when you splash it or paint it with some water, it turns into paint. I've always loved these transforming media. And it's a lot of fun. And you know what? I don't think too much about what this is going to look like. I don't plan it out at all in advance. Whatever color seems right, whatever shape, I actually try to move my hand in different directions, make different shapes and lines, and splash things around a little bit. That's the beauty of working outside with a cloth on the table. You can just be as messy as you want. And here's where I decided to just make as many shapes as my hand could kind of toss off. And I even splashed some paint. Those watercolor paint brushes where the paint is built in, it's really fun. You can just splash the paint a little bit. And then you can even do a little detail, working with, I love some of the shiny markers and the glitter. And here's my final paper, but I'm not yet done making my artwork. Because what I like to do is take this big messy drawing and cut it up into nice, neat squares and rectangles. And all I have to do to get a nice, neat line is to fold the paper. Something about those sharp edges where the paint goes right up to the edge of the paper and even spills over the side. I really like the way that looks. And sometimes I make squares and sometimes I make rectangles. And now I've got lots and lots of different pieces of multicolored paper that I can use for all kinds of projects. Now, this was really fun. I have this great pad of multicolored paper, all different shades of paper. And I like to pick which one matches the best. Get my trusty glue stick. And there's no rule for this. It's just a question of what strikes your eye and seems like a good combination. Now that's ready for the collage. So here we are with this is that piece that I showed you in the video. And then I thought about this green. And then I was thinking about this stamp from Ellsworth Kelly that has a lot of green and blue in it. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to rip this old envelope with this stamp on it, because I really love the way ripped paper can look. And oh, that made a kind of a funny shape. Wonder if I can use that. And then another thing I like to do is to take a piece of black paper, just have this black construction paper here, and I just cut a nice simple rectangle. And I'll tell you why I do that, because it's a nice contrast to this crazy color paper. So yeah, I'm starting to like that. Maybe this is a little too big and I want a little bit more of a ripped look. There we go. I like the way that looks. So I'm going to glue that in place. I'll glue those two pieces right together. I like this glue stick because you can see it. You know how much you're putting on. Put that right on the edge. I don't know, there's something about the way the solid black contrasts with all that color. And then my ripped edged stamp paper. See, I think I like the way that looks. And I was thinking about, I don't know why, but I was thinking about green, and I was thinking about this plant that I planted in my garden. This is from a seed packet, and I just love this word, Gobbo d'inizia. So I chose that little scrap, and I'm going to glue the back of it. Let's see. I like that. There. And there's my collage. I like the way the black and black are next to each other. That great word, Gobbo d'inizia. And the green and the green and the blue and the blue. Well, there you go. It's kind of a fun way to look carefully and think about one stamp.
I love the way you pulled everything that we've talked about today together and pulled in Ellsworth Kelly's stamp. And torn paper is so beautiful. Appreciate that you emphasize that in the demo. Parents and teachers, after kids finish their stamp art and travel collages, talk about what we learn by traveling around our communities. and when we imagine trips to distant places. Then please take a photo of the young artist's work and post those in the comments section of this video. We can't wait to see what they create. As our viewers are finishing their art, I have a special message for teachers and parents. Be the first to know about fun and free learning programs like this one, and continue to talk with kids about the many ways we can learn through art by signing up for the Crayola Education e-newsletters. Every month, you'll receive updates about the future Art of Learning programs and get access to many other colorful resources. So Tom, please share how our viewers can continue to follow you and learn from you by going to social media.
My website is www.tomleestoryteller.net, and that has information about my stories and storytelling, but there's also a section where I tell stories about paintings, stories, and art. So families can watch those stories together, and there's art activities about the pictures that are included. And I love to hear from kids and see examples of their work, and I know you do too.
Our guests today are active in organizations that offer resources and insights that parents and teachers can use in your work with kids. You can explore FAPE's amazing art collection on their website, on Instagram and Facebook. There you'll find images by Ellsworth Kelly and Stephen Antonakis, who generously donate their work to American embassies. You can learn more about our embassies around the world and hear from artists themselves in the videos and panel discussions that are available. There's also a special coloring book of FAPE's collection on their homepage. Just scroll to the bottom and you can download it for free. So Robert, before we close this session, what last advice do you want to share with the children, parents, and teachers who've joined us today?
The world is there to be discovered. Everybody discovers it for themselves. It's there to be discovered absolutely anew. There's a famous poem of Walt Whitman, the great American poet, which says, "A child went out one morning, and what he saw, what he beheld, he became." So that the child goes out and sees a flower and he becomes the flower. That's a good way to think about life in general. You are your circumstances and the way in which you assimilate, process, notice, or don't notice your circumstances. That's who you are. And you want to keep yourself alert so that you notice the most, synthesize it the most richly for yourself and for others. And then if you're an artist, if you're a maker, you want to interpret it in forms and shapes and colors. That's another thing. Ellsworth did a book called Line, Shape, and Color, which was a kind of handbook or textbook for how to deal with the basics of art. Now, you can apply those basics to noticing the world. You can take a sketchbook with you wherever you go, and you can describe the things that you notice. And don't ask what it means. It means what it is. But do pay attention and do make notes. And if you make notes of the world as you see it, and then if you flip through them, you'll find that it's very different than taking pictures with a camera. It is much more engaging in some cases, less so in others maybe, but in some cases much more so. And it is all yours because a camera interprets the world for you. In drawings, you interpret the world for yourself. And you make memories of it that will be much more vivid in your mind if you've actually drawn it when you're out there with a sketchbook. So do take a sketchbook with you on the subway. Do take a sketchbook with you in the back of the car if you're driving around with your parents. Do take a sketchbook if you're going with a group of friends to something and you see something that catches your eye. Make a note of that and have that be the key to your memories of those worlds that you pass through.
Love that advice, that we travel around our communities, on subways, all around us, we would observe and sketch. And that really is the beauty of learning from our travels. Tom, what advice do you have for our viewers so they continue to create art and sketch what they observe?
Well, I guess my last comment is a lot like my first comment. Look, notice, talk about what you see, share opinions. I love to hear a bunch of different people looking at an artwork and 6 different people having, as we say in my family, 6 people can have 7 ideas. Bring a sketchbook when you go to a museum or even when you go out in your backyard and sketch what you see, look back at your sketches and talk about your sketches with your friends and family.
We want to thank Robert Storr and Tom Lee for inspiring us today. And please join me in thanking our friends at the Foundation for Art and Preservation in Embassies, who brought these experts to today's program. And a special thank you to you, our viewers, for joining us as we explore the many ways we learn about and through art.
Goodbye. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.